Why, hi there. Welcome to Mrs. K's way of teaching you about absolute value and the opposites of integers. We're going to talk about three different things. We are first going to be talking about what are opposites, finding absolute value, and then we're going to compare and order the integers depending on their opposite values and their opposites. Let's first talk about opposites. An opposite is the pair of numbers that are the same distance away from zero, but on opposite sides of zero. So if we take and we made a line right at zero, we have both our positive numbers on the right and our negative numbers on the left. What opposites are, and it's a lot easier to show than to talk in the definition, is if we look at the value of 3, we want a number that is the same distance, 1, 2, 3, away from 0, but we want it to be its negative counterpart. So if we have positive 3, then we know starting here, 1, 2, 3, on the other side of 0, we would get the opposite of negative 3. Thus, we know that negative 3 is the opposite of 3. This also works for negative 1. The opposite of negative 1 is its positive counterpart, which is positive 1. When we're talking about finding absolute value, it seems very similar to opposites, but this time we are only talking about the distance a number is away from 0. So again, if we have our line right here at 0, this is kind of home base. If we're looking at our value of 2, we want to know what the absolute value is. We want to know what the distance 2 is away from 0. So if we start at our integer of positive 2, we can go as many times as we need, 1, 2, to get to 0. So the absolute value of 2 is actually a distance of 2. How we write absolute value is by having a line, straight line, the number, and then a straight line. These are a different set of parentheses. So we know that the absolute value of positive 2 is equal to a distance of positive 2. Now let's look at its opposite. Let's look at negative 2. Well, we're going to still start at negative 2 and count how many times we need to go until we reach 0. 1, 2. That means that we also have a distance of 2. Our distance is always positive, so we don't have to talk about negative 2 being negative 2 steps away from 0. So if we write the absolute value of negative 2, it also will be 2. So it's interesting to know that our opposites, negative 2 and positive 2, have the same absolute value. However, we need to remember that absolute value is always positive because it's the distance. It's not about being the number value or what side of the number line it's on. It's just about the distance. When comparing and ordering integers, I have this box in these 5 different categories right here because I want to try to see if the first number is going to be greater than, less than, or equal to. Kind of looks like a face. Kind of funny, huh? Ooh. Well, if we look at our first example right here, and we're comparing the numbers positive 2 and positive 4. If we look on the number line, and we look at positive 2 and positive 4, we see that positive 4 is to the right on the number line, and we know as you go to the right, the numbers get greater. So for this example, we know that positive 4 is greater than positive 2. If we look at our second example right here, negative 2 and negative 4, if we place those on the number line, we see negative 2 and negative 4. Again, we still have the same rationale that since negative 2 is on the right side, that means it is a larger quantity than negative 4. Remember, just because we see 4, the negative makes it a smaller value. Thus, we know that negative 2 is greater than negative 4. What's nice about our next 2 examples is that we don't even really need to put these on the number line since we know our understanding of positive and negative numbers. Right here with positive 2 and negative 4, we obviously know that positive 2 is greater because any positive number is greater than any negative number. We can also show that right here on the number line, just in case to remind ourselves that the positive numbers are larger. Same thing for our second to last example, -2 and +4. We know all positive numbers are larger, thus we are able to know that +4 is greater than -2. Our last example is two absolute values. If we take the absolute value of -2 and the absolute value of -4, we are going to compare those absolute values. So first you need to simplify. The absolute value of -2 is 2, and the absolute value of -4 is 4. We now want to compare our +2 and our +4, which we already did in our first example. Thus, we know that the absolute value of -2 is less than the absolute value of -4. Since we talked about different mirroring and different opposites, that kind of reminded me of this picture of my puppy Callie when she was about 6 months old. As you can see, there is the mirror right here, and if we wanted to think about it, we could think that the mirrored image, the image in the mirror, is the opposite of the actual Callie looking into the mirror. Not only is this part of the lesson, but I just thought it was a really cute picture. Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Bye.